how modern life affects childbirth. Because I've actually had the privilege of working a lot in developing countries, and I've worked a lot in Western countries as well. And I've noticed there's a massive, massive, massive reasons of why modern life really affects childbirth. So, what we're actually going to discuss in our workshop Discovery is how the brain affects us. And we've already touched a lot on that actually in our discussions already. And also about our body contraction. So through our modern life, our body actually contracts, and that actually impedes our uterus. It actually makes our uterus a little bit tense. And so baby does not get into a really good position for childbirth. And I'll discuss that a little bit later. And diet and exercise, that's huge. And that's one of the pillars of my coaching company. It really is, because it is absolutely massive. So if we can get these three core problems into a really good space, we've actually got a really good chance of having a really great experience with the whole continuum of pregnancy and childbirth and motherhood. So women's bodies have a perfect knowledge of childbirth. It's when their brains get involved. We've already discussed this, haven't we? That's when things go wrong, because people go in their brains and they don't go into their hearts. And we've already discussed that. That is so true, isn't it, Liz?
Yeah, and everyone's birth journey is unique to them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, women do not get told. Women hear about the birth journeys that have had their traumatic moments in that woman's mind, and then they think, oh, but what if that happens to me, and all of this. So that then you set up the fear response, and they're not, it's not realizing that each one of us has a unique journey for birthing.
Absolutely, because every woman's different.
Yeah, very much so.
Everybody's different. Like, we look different. Our bodies are different. Everything is different. And it's one of the things that really kept midwifery interesting for me. And I'm sure it kept it interesting for you as well, because, I mean, like, you've been a midwife for close on 40 years, that's an incredible career, Liz. And me for only half that time. And it's still a long time, isn't it? But it's half the time that you're a midwife. It's kind of fascinating. And it's something that really kept us interesting. Life as a midwife is never boring, was it?
Definitely not. Challenging,
Never boring.
but never boring.
No, never boring. And, like, we're experts in our field. And the really cool thing about being an expert is that you're still always learning.
Most
Because
definitely.
everybody is different.
Mm.
And that's one of the things I loved about clinical midwifery practice. It was awesome. So we've already touched on this before, but a lot of it's about fear and perception, isn't it? Because
definitely,
when you're looking at when we're growing up, everything that we hear about birth is based on in fear. You've got to go to a hospital, number one. Fear. Because they know how to manage a childbirth. Not we know how to manage a childbirth. No, they, as in the medicos, know how to manage a childbirth. And we're part of the medical system. Even though we're midwives, we're still part of that skilled set, aren't we?
Oh, yes. And to step outside of that as a midwife is challenging, as we all know.
Yeah, trying to be that bridge between the medical system
Mm.
and the natural system. It's very, very challenging. It's one of the main reasons why I left when I did, because it was just getting too challenging for me. I just went, no, there's a way I can help women that doesn't involve a hospital. And so it's all about fear and perception. So we've seen it in movies, in American movies, where someone breaks their waters when they're shopping in a supermarket. And then it's all mad panic and they rush to the hospital. And the next thing you know, there's lots of screaming and the doctors and everyone's panicking. And then, oh, yes, then I have a baby. It's all good. Or when you're
Yeah.
pregnant. And the first thing you hear when you're pregnant is everybody's birthing story, and people have a way of telling them the really bad stories.
Oh, only the worst. Don't get you can't have a good one.
Exactly. I was in labor for 40 hours. Those types of, and so that also instills the fear in us. And also our perception on what birth is. So are we really afraid of pain? Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid of pain. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm afraid of pain. And so they opt for an epidural. And fair enough, everybody is, we've got that service. We can have that. That's okay. It's a woman's right. It's a woman's prerogative to choose that if she wants. But it's really, really cool if people are taught or know the full range of what is available and how they can actually go through childbirth and actually control their own pain through
Mm.
baths, through meditation, through, all those calm birth and hypnobirthing techniques, that breathing techniques, because there are ways we can do that. And guess what? We can do anything for a short amount of time. Don't we say it's the only positive pain experience we'll ever experience in our lives?
Yes, with a lovely reward at the end of it.
Massive. And it's a kick, just a beautiful, lovely, incredible kickboxing, huge reward at the end of it.
Mm.
And when you're looking at all those beautiful faces of women, they are so incredibly just in awe of themselves for birthing, in awe of themselves. I have seen that over and over and over again, and so have you. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
So, what this actually creates is a subconscious tension. So, it's interesting when you're pregnant, isn't it? And then one of the first things you realize and you ask yourself is, oh my gosh, one day I actually have to birth this. One day this actually has to come out of my body. And you go, how am I going to do that? But then you've got 9 months to process that. So consciously, we process it. And consciously on some levels, where if someone opts for a normal childbirth, for a natural childbirth, they will be able to let go. But there's also that little tiny subconscious tension. And that subconscious tension is that tension that we have, that subconscious programming that's running in the back of our mind, much like the RAM is running in the back of our computer that we're not aware of, but we can run all these incredible applications on our computer, like what I'm doing now with Zoom and Canva. So
Mm.
that's really interesting as well. And there's actually amazing ways we can actually train our brain to eliminate that subconscious tension as well. So I've just got a couple of slides here to actually talk about perception, because you've got to talk about perception with pictures. I love it. So I love this picture, Liz. What do you reckon?
It's a very interesting one. Yes.
Isn't it amazing?
Mm.
So what do you see?
Someone, the guy's like running from, and actually the lass is looking, but she's looking actually quite calm.
Mm,
it's
And then there's a train on the right-hand side
oh, yeah, yeah.
and the
Mm,
rails coming up
mm,
and the smoke coming up that's his hair.
there's a lot in it.
Exactly. So I actually read a very, very interesting fact the other day about how we interpret the world around us. Would you like to hear it, Liz?
I'd love to.
Because this is totally geeking out, okay? So we've got our brain. We've got the optic nerve going from our brain to our eyes and from our eyes to our brain. Do you know that we have 10 times more neuronal activity going from our brain to our eyes along the optic nerve than we do coming from our eyes to our brain?
Okay.
That's been measured.
Mm,
So, what does that tell you about perception? That the thoughts, the beliefs, the values, that unconscious programming that we have that we're not even aware about can actually influence what we are seeing.
yeah. And that something I came across not that long back. That process, programming, actually starts from when we're very little.
It does, yeah.
And
Even in utero.
yeah, and to change that program take takes work and being very conscious of the thoughts you're having, and particularly when you're having a lot of negative thoughts, being aware that you're actually being being aware that they're negative and where they've come from. Why do you think like that?
Yeah. Yeah. And once you develop that self-awareness and you've got that curiosity of, hang on, there's a negative thought, where on earth is that coming from?
Mm.
You can actually look back and pick out patterns in your thinking and when you're thinking these thoughts and why you're thinking these thoughts and the behaviors that come from those thoughts.
Mm.
Because from our thinking comes our behavior.
Yeah, agree.
It's really interesting. It really is. And as you said, our programming starts from basically up until we're 7 years old, and it actually starts to happen in utero. Like there's been a really interesting study, it's called the Dowood study, and they're talking about chronic stress in pregnancy. Have you heard about this study, Liz?
No, but keep going. I think I've picked up a little bit about stress in pregnancy just recently.
Yeah, so what they've actually isolated a gene in our placenta that is actually, and our bodies are so fantastic, it actually protects us against stress hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline. So it protects the baby. So it's like a gatekeeper that stops the cortisol and the adrenaline from from crossing the placenta. But what they've noticed is that women who have a lot of stress in their lives, which in modern society actually goes to a lot of women that I've experienced through my practice,
Mm.
incredible amount of women through our practice that are really, really stressed because they've got jobs, they've got families, they've got problems. It's just huge. It's just busy, 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 rush, rush, rush all the time. And that's what modern life is. Women who experience this chronic stress, that gene is actually turned off. So the cortisol goes through the placenta
Mm.
goes into the baby. So the baby is actually receiving this cortisol, this stress hormone in utero. So what they've actually done, it's actually a very, very big study, and the preliminary findings are out. And they followed these babies at the moment till 4 months old. So it's a randomized controlled trial. They have babies that are measured that women that are measured that have low cortisol in their bloodstream, and women that are measured that have high cortisol in their bloodstream. So it's a randomized controlled trial. And they've actually looked at these babies and observed these babies every month from the time that they're born. And when they're 4 months old, you can see a notable difference between the activity of the baby, the restlessness of the baby. And that also goes, and that is actually a scientific study, and it's actually a very well constructed study. It's called the Doe study. And if you're looking at through our practice, Liz, when you're looking at someone that is really, really, really super anxious and really super stressed in pregnancy, what do they experience when the baby's born? Do they experience a lovely sleepy baby that breastfeeds and sleeps and is nice and settled, or do they have a colicky baby?
Oh, they have the unsettled baby for
They
sure.
do. They do. It happens time and time and time again.
Mm.
Time and time and time again. And that is anecdotal evidence that has been repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and observed, not only by me, but by you.
Oh, and I think, um, I don't have I don't know where the studies, I don't know what the studies are, but something, um, I heard just recently that that actually, that stress, anxiety of pregnancy can actually affect not just the first 4 months, but long period, and can set them a risk for other health issues down the track.
Yeah.
And like listening to this talk, the red flags that kept coming up were like, wow, oh, really? I wish I'd known that a few years ago. Um, yeah, it was. Hopefully, I will be able to access some of the studies. I think there's a lot of stuff on PubMed.
Hmm.
If you, but yeah, um, and then you wonder how much that affects that increase we're seeing in some things. Uh, you know, some disease, say diseases first, but is it just the fact we're diagnosing it more? We're better at diagnosing it, or is it actually happening more? Are some of these things on the increase? And there's certainly enough information starting to filter through to make you think, well, maybe, you know, various factors are contributing to this increase of various. I mean, one of the things that I know, I asked a question years ago: Are we diagnosing asthma a lot earlier or better, or have we got an increase in asthma?
Mm.
And I think the studies have come. We've actually got an increase.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with ADHD. Like, we've
Yeah.
always had hyperactive people, but now you speak to any school teacher and they will say that they've got a classes full of kids with ADHD. And the
Mm.
latest statistics, I don't have my handle on the latest statistics, but the increase is going is huge. Like, it's almost tripled in 20 years.
Yeah, and I think I actually heard some of those figures probably 4 or 5 years ago,
Hmm.
and I heard some more just recently, and yeah, I agree, they had at least tripled
Yeah,
in that short period of time.
yeah. And
So again,
Yeah. And I actually found a study. This is very recently. I found a study it's an animal study. It's not a human study. It was on cats. And cats that were actually fed processed foods when they were pregnant, okay, so a high amount of processed foods, their little kittens were hyperactive.
I can believe it.
Well, I know it's an animal study, but there's some correlation there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to be talking about food a little bit later on. But I just love these perception photos because what do you see there, Liz? Do you see a sky or do you see a car?
You see the car, you see reflection of sky on the bonnet, across the top. It's actually looking like a car that's been in that spot for a very long time.
Yeah. Or just
Mm,
or just the sky in the forest.
yeah. Yeah. The more you look at it, the more you can unpack it, can't you?
Yeah, it's just all about perception and how we actually perceive our world around us
Mm,
and how that really impacts on our pregnancy journey and our birthing journey and our journey into motherhood.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love this one.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Perception. Where are you looking at things from? What angle are you looking at things from?
Oh,
Absolutely determines what it actually is.
that is a classic. Well, he's looking from the top down, and
It is.
totally different perception.
I thought you'd like that one. That one's
Yeah.
awesome. So it's all about training our brain. Now, oh, come on. Shall we let it go?
Which,
One powerful woman that broke through the barriers and actually did something. Now, the really interesting thing is, and I just want to make a comparison between what we've been talking about in our society with women becoming so removed from their bodies, their awareness, the whole belief of that fear is that birth is something to be feared about, that has to be controlled by the medical system, is when you're looking at women in developing countries, they haven't been exposed to that, um, to any of that. And so they still have their sisterhood around them. I remember when I was working in Yemen, the sisterhood in Yemen was just incredible. And women only came to the hospital when they had something wrong in labour. So all we saw were complications, more complications, and more complications. Now, the thing that I absolutely loved about that is that they just got on with it. They just got on with it. They came because we had a hospital with obstetric care, with midwifery care and obstetric care, and we could do something about it. And strangely enough, they didn't have any birth trauma. Not that I could see anyway, but the lives were a lot different to our lives. Their lives were lives of struggle,
yeah.
you know. There's this beautiful, I think I might have told you this story. It's a beautiful story that I experienced pretty well after I soon got there in Yemen. This woman came in, it was the first baby, and she had a very grossly preterm baby, estimated around 26, 28 weeks. It was the size of my palm. I could hold it in my palm. It was the size of my palm. Now, normally a baby like that would die. but she had the luxury, it was her first baby, so she had the luxury of actually keeping this baby, and it was breathing. And we didn't have any intubators, we didn't have any ventilators, we only had a humidity crib. That's all we had was a humidity crib, and that humidity crib, that isolate, was donated by USAID. You know, that's the only thing we had. But what she did is that have I told you this story before,
No.
Liz? So what she did, she had one of these gym bras, and she actually put the baby between her breasts, so it was skin to skin. And what she did from the moment that that baby was born is that she'd express colostrum into a syringe that we gave her, and she would just feed these little tiny drops of colostrum into the baby. And we were fully expecting this little baby, it was a baby girl, I remember. We fully expected her to pass away. And so we just sort of left them to do their thing because we were so busy doing other things. You want to know something? The love of the mother, the love of her, and the fact that she was so diligently feeding little drops of colostrum into her baby's mouth. That
And the
baby
skin to
survived.
skin.
And the skin to skin, exactly, feeling that love, feeling that connection, feeling that heat, feeling that energy, feeling the heartbeat. All of that.
Oh,
That baby survived the first 24 hours. Like, wow, that's pretty good. Survived the next 24 hours. Survived a week. Started to put on a little bit of weight. Her milk came in, started to put on a little bit of weight. So she was with us for, I reckon, about 2 months.
yeah,
That
that'd make
baby,
sense.
yep, that baby was there. Baby was about 700 grams, I think it was, when it was born.
Yeah.
And it left, and it was about double its weight, I think. I can't remember exactly, but it was about double its weight. And the baby left. It was still alive. It was still alive.
Yeah.
It didn't have any complications. It didn't have any sepsis. It didn't have any necrotizing ankleitis. Sorry, I've got an
Any speech
impairment.
neck.
Thank you. It didn't have any neck. That's the easy way. It had nothing like that. It just survived. It thrived. It thrived through the mother's love and through just that true diligence that the mother had. And the really, really cool thing, and this is why I remember it so well, I was just leaving actually, and this woman came in with this great big beautiful baby on her arm. She came into the maternity ward with the biggest smile on her face, with this big strapping baby, and she was saying, hey, this is the baby, this is a baby, that was little tiny
Wow.
baby. And that was huge. She just brought it in for the 6-month immunizations at the immunization clinic, and she just had to show us that her baby survived at 26, 27 weeks max.
And that baby, I would assume, developed physically, mentally, with it should not have had any delay. May have had a few developmental delays, but be okay
Looks
because of
perfectly
that.
normal. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And it just goes to show you how skin to skin
Oh,
is so important.
it is.
You know, and just in a segue, it's just incredible how we isolate these babies into a little isolette, or if they're really premature like that, into a resuscitaire. You know, those things, and we
Yeah,
put them all there, and the mother can't really touch it. It's incredible, isn't it?
it is. It's
Really is, and I can understand it. Like, let's face it, 26 weeks, babies are routinely surviving now at 26 weeks, but
mm,
with full medical intervention. There was actually a study done in a hospital in Vancouver where they actually had, where a mother was actually reading a book into a tape recorder and just reading a book, reading a book, reading a book. And when the mother was away, they would put that tape recorder in the isolette. And so the baby was constantly hearing the mother's voice. And
Yeah,
guess what? They had greater weight gain, less complications, and a shorter stay.
yeah, I can
Pretty
believe
cool,
it.
eh? Pretty cool. And they also had beds made up that were right next door to the isolette. And guess what? The mother did the cares.
Mm,
Gave all the responsibility to the mother, and the nurses just oversaw everything to make sure that everything was running smoothly. Don't you
yeah,
love that?
I do.
Yeah. And we tend to take that away. Again, it's not a symptom of the medicalization of the Western world.